Welcome to Hot Topics. Our subject in this video is labeling of equipment. Why are two labels required? We get these questions quite a bit here lately. So in this video I would like to discuss the NEC and NFPA 70E. Now let's go over to page 48 in your code book if you have it handy. If you don't, I'll just read along. But 110.16a, electrical equipment such as switchboards, switchgear, panel boards, industrial control panels, and meters, if worked on while energized, need this label. Now, what I would like to point out that's giving folks a lot of trouble is in 110.16a, the first line, electrical equipment such as. Such as seems to be the cement that creates a lot of problems throughout this labeling requirement. Now, basically, we get questions, why is so much of this equipment having labels on them, on such equipment, when we only have these certain pieces mentioned? But you got to look at that such as. And when, say, a safety engineer or a safety manual wants all types of equipment marked that could produce an arc that could burn a person beyond a second-degree burn in accordance with 70E, say, or could cause someone to receive a fatal electrical shock or get hurt in some way by electrical shock. They want this label on. They kind of feel like, well, if there's any kind of error that could occur, let it be in our favor, see. So that is one section that starts this whole thing in motion. Now, 110.16b, as in boy, is new and revised material. And notice service equipment, other than dwelling unit service equipment, is required basically to have a label that will, item 1, list the voltage, 2, the available short circuit current, item 3 would deal with the amount of time and clearing time of the protective device, and then the date that the label was applied. And then, of course, you have the exception there that you could also review that deals with labeling. And then, of course, the informational note 1 for the second label now that's required, the owner has to provide that label and be responsible for that label. And that's in 70E, 130.5H on page 29, which we will review later. Now, the next section that I suggest that you look at is 110.21b as in boy. It's on page 49, left-hand side of the page, down at the bottom. And the title head is Field Applied Hazardous Markings. And basically, they want to make sure the label has the appropriate wording, coloring, any kind of symbols, or any combination of to provide a good warning label on the equipment. And that's very important to someone servicing equipment to have this information available to them. Now, the next section I would suggest you look at is 110.24a as in apple. It's on page 49 on the right-hand side of the page, and it says a title head Field Markings. And then, of course, it basically talks about this available short circuit current on the service equipment and any other type facility except a dwelling unit that is stated there. And then it has an informational note on page 50 left-hand side of the page at the top that says, and kind of states that the electrical engineer calculating this available short circuit current, where the utility is willing, could get that information from the utility and the available short circuit current, the amount from their power source, their transformer, to the service equipment overcurrent device. In other words, if that's the service point. And then from there, you would have to calculate it. But usually that service point is usually at a weather head or at a meter base, some place like that is where you'd find that. Engineers know where the service point is defined in Article 100. Now, once these plans have been developed based upon the NEC, they are presented to the contractor to bid the job. And that's where the contractor has to be very careful. In the specifications and the specs, the contractor knows that he or she's responsible for the NEC label. But the second label that's required by NFPA 70E, the owner's responsible for that label. So who is the owner going to pay to collect this information? A contractor I just talked to maybe 2 or 3 days ago, he told me that he did not notice that in this second label that was required by the owner, that was in his contract, that he had to provide it. And he said by the time that he collected all that data, had an engineer run the calculations for as required, that he actually paid to do the job. So contractors have to be very careful with this dual labeling. One labels NEC, yes, contractor, you're responsible for that. But the 70E label of 130.5H on page 29 of the code, the owners are responsible for that. So find out who's going to pay for that, who's going to upfront the money to provide that label, because it can be very expensive when you get into this in greater detail. So keep that in mind, and we're going to look at a couple illustrations to illustrate this a little further.